up, you guys? I hope you're doing very well. Welcome on board a new video and our race review for the 2021 season opening Bahrain Grand Prix. So guys, it was Lewis Hamilton, the seven-time world champion, who took victory the past Sunday in Bahrain and started his journey towards what is possible, a 8th world championship. Now, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the controversy that was behind the victory, at least to some people, as well as go through the main events of the race and the race results in this video. So just briefly, guys, so that everybody knows what we're talking about, let's run through the race results. And this is official race results Bahrain 2021, starting with the top 10 finishers, guys. The point scorers: winner Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes; second, Max Verstappen driving the Red Bull; third, Valtteri Bottas for Mercedes. Also, Bottas scored the fastest lap of the race, which gives him 1 extra point, so he collected 16 points for that third place podium finish. Fourth, Lando Norris, McLaren; fifth, Sergio Perez for Red Bull; sixth, Charles Leclerc for Ferrari; seventh, Daniel Ricciardo for McLaren; eighth, Carlos Sainz for Ferrari; ninth, in his F1 debut, guys, really impressive stuff, Yuki Tsunoda, the Japanese youngster for AlphaTauri; and 10th, rounding up the points finishers, was the Canadian Lance Stroll, obviously driving for Aston Martin. Okay, guys, running through the non-points finishers and the DNFs fast. We have Kimi Räikkönen in 11th place, just slightly missing out on points, obviously driving the Alfa Romeo. His teammate Antonio Giovinazzi ended up 12th in the race, with Esteban Ocon, the Alpine driver, in 13th, George Russell for Williams in 14th, and Sebastian Vettel for Aston Martin 15th. He had a nightmare of a debut. We'll be talking more about, more in depth about Sebastian Vettel in a moment. And Mick Schumacher, the Haas driver, on his F1 debut, don't forget, Michael Schumacher's son, was 16th. Last but not least, the DNFs. There were altogether 4 DNFs in the race. Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri; Nicolas Latifi, the Williams driver; Fernando Alonso, Alpine driver; and on the first lap, Nikita Mazepin, the Russian Haas rookie driver. Those were the DNFs of the Bahrain Grand Prix. So guys, we move on to the main events of the race, the talking points, whatever you want to call them. And oh my days, have I missed this? Have I missed F1? And I mean, it's only one race into the season, but by the looks of it, it looks like we really do have an amazing title race this season, with Max Verstappen going absolutely wheel to wheel with Lewis Hamilton challenging him to the sword. It's going to be real interesting watching that throughout the season. But going through the main events, guys, first of all, before the race even started, we had Sergio Perez having his Red Bull debut, and drama for Perez on the not the opening lap, on the formation lap, as his Red Bull just suddenly went, the monitor on the steering wheel went completely black out. The engine stopped running, and it almost looked like it was going to be a DNF for Checo Perez before the race even starts. Somehow, he managed to get the car going. Quoting him, Checo said after the race that, "I was pressing some buttons and I just got the thing working again." So we're very happy that Checo managed to get his car going again. However, having stopped during the formation lap and got his engine running again meant that Checo Perez had to start his Red Bull debut from the pit lane, ultimately meaning that he started last instead of his actual qualifying position, which I think was 12th. And anybody who watched the race knows that the drama didn't end here. We get Checo Perez to the pit lane for his basically his updated starting position, and the actual race gets going. it's drama for Nikita Mazepin on the first lap. Unfortunately for him in his F1 debut, that debut lasted about 10 seconds because a driving error by him going through the combination of turns 2 and 3 meant that he spun his Haas and eventually ended up hitting the wall, causing a safety car to come out. So there was a safety car incident immediately on the first lap. We're also, of course, happy that Nikita Mazepin wasn't injured in that event, and he is reportedly fine. Then we get to the main points of the actual race, and I have to say that this season, behind Mercedes and Red Bull, which are ultimately the top two teams, we have an incredibly tight, interesting battle between Ferrari and McLaren, these two teams look incredibly competitive against one another. You had some great racing there between Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. Actually, Leclerc had a great start to the race. He managed to overtake Valtteri Bottas in, I think it was the first lap in the start. And then later on, Bottas had to win that position back via overtake. It's going to be really interesting to see how this Ferrari-McLaren battle unfolds during the season, and also, given that Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz are both new in their teams, how does this battle look when these two guys get up to speed with their new cars? It's going to be really tough. I think it's going to be wheel to wheel all the way to the end of the season, and nobody knows which team will actually get that third place in the constructors behind Mercedes and Red Bull. And we talk about teams behind Mercedes and Red Bull, but let's just not forget Mercedes and Red Bull themselves, because unlike in basically the last, feels like forever, but the last several seasons where Red Bull has been maybe second best, maybe third best, but always miles behind Mercedes, it just feels that based on this first race, it looks like Red Bull really can challenge Mercedes, not only for a Drivers' World Championship title, but also for the Constructors' World Championship. So guys, for the first time in ages, we might actually have two incredibly competitive teams fighting against one another for the Constructors' World Championship and battling for which team has the better car, which at the moment we don't exactly know. And that is really refreshing. It's what F1 has needed for years. It's what the fans have been hoping for. And I'm not going to call it yet because we've only seen one race, but it looks incredibly competitive between these two teams. Going more deeply into this Mercedes-Red Bull battle in this particular race, I think Red Bull actually screwed up because we can talk about the track limit controversy and steward inconsistency and stuff like that, and that is relevant. But in my opinion, Red Bull didn't actually lose the victory, Verstappen's victory, because Verstappen let Hamilton through at the end of the race after having overtaken him. I think they actually lost this race for Verstappen because they didn't react to Lewis Hamilton's first stop. Lewis Hamilton came in, I'll just have to check that. Lewis Hamilton's first pit stop was on lap 14, and on lap 14 when he came in, the gap between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, with Verstappen leading the race, was about 1.5-2 seconds. Had Verstappen actually reacted to Hamilton's pit stop and come into the pits immediately on the next lap, given that Red Bull are normally always the fastest team with pit stops, he probably would have come back on track leading the race again. But instead of doing that, Hamilton comes into the pits and Red Bull just don't react. They actually kept Verstappen on track for like six laps, and eventually when Max Verstappen came into the pits, he emerged back on track in second place, and also some distance behind Lewis Hamilton. in my opinion, I just want to say this, before we talk about track limits and the overtaking scenario between Max and Lewis at the end, I think actually Max Verstappen's win was screwed up at this point when Red Bull decided not to react to Mercedes' pit stop strategy. Guys, I'll get back to Verstappen and Hamilton when I cover the end of the race. Just a little look at the Finns here in between. So Valtteri Bottas, to anybody wondering why he wasn't exactly involved in the fight for victory, he had a 10-second pit stop, which was, if I remember correctly, the second time when Bottas came in, there was something, the Mercedes pit crew screwed up, and his pit stop, which normally pit stops are anywhere around 2 and 3 seconds, it ended up taking 10 seconds, and that ultimately dropped him from the battle for the win. However, Mercedes had some good strategic eye, and at the end of the race they actually pitted him for a third time, put on fresh medium tires, and made it available for him to basically get the fastest lap of the race with ease at the end and score 1 extra point. So that was, for Valtteri Bottas, it was, I guess you could call it damage limitation for Valtteri Bottas' opening race this season. Obviously, when something goes wrong in the pit stops, it's not his fault, and he just had to do the basic things well and secure that, bring the car home in third place after that. Moving on to the 4-time world champion, guys, Sebastian Vettel, driving his Aston Martin debut. Now, I'm going to be doing the driver ratings in another video, so I'm going to be covering Vettel more in depth in the next video. But anyway, Sebastian Vettel had an absolute nightmare last weekend, failed to qualify into Q2, and also just had a really bumpy race. There was an incident with Esteban Ocon, which quite incredibly, for whatever reason, Vettel actually blamed Ocon for that incident, but there was really nothing Ocon could have done. Vettel screwed up, he locked the front tires and bumped into Ocon. There was nothing Ocon did wrong in there. Sebastian Vettel also had a 10-second time penalty for that. It just all went wrong for him this weekend. Finally, guys, we get to that great battle between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen at the end of the race. And this is, I think there's actually 2 perspectives to this, and both are important. Both are very correct. Now, I'm going to start with a positive spin to this, which is that that battle at the end between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, Verstappen catching Hamilton with those more fresh tires and just going absolutely wheel to wheel in those last laps, overtaking Hamilton, however exceeding the track limits when doing so, and having to give that position back, and then chasing Hamilton again. Both of these guys, super talented guys, under pressure, and something we see very rarely, both of these guys doing some mistakes also there, just pure driving errors, because they were really running out of tires at the end there, and they were pressuring one another to the limit. And this is the kind of racing we want to see between these two guys. That is a great thing. Also, another great thing is that, by the looks of it, Red Bull have finally provided Max Verstappen, of course also Sergio Perez, with a car that's capable of challenging for wins and also challenging for the World Championship. I would say Max Verstappen is definitely in the fight for this season's World Championship, and that's something you couldn't say in the previous seasons. Not because he didn't have the talent, he always did. Not because he didn't have the speed, he always did. But because he didn't have the package earlier, and now it seems like Red Bull have finally solved that issue. So that is great. A huge thank you in terms of making the season interesting goes to Red Bull and goes to Max Verstappen. hopefully also Checo Perez will be up there in the upcoming races, mixing it up and preventing Mercedes from having that kind of 2 versus 1 power play, and an edge with pit stop strategy, having 2 cars battling against 1. So guys, that's the positive spin. Now I'm going to, unfortunately, because I love this sport, and I think in this sport, when performance is measured, it's important for credibility as well, that measuring of performance is always consistent, it's always obeying the rules, and it's always fair to the different drivers, the different athletes racing against each other. I'm going to unfortunately have to say that I'm extremely disappointed with the steward inconsistency. Basically, the FIA, who are, the stewards are for F1 the same thing as referees are for some other sport. So, in my opinion, and I'm just going to say this applies to every track, and I just want to get this out there. When you're racing, when you're doing F1 or whatever other motorsport it is, and you have track limits are track limits, and they should always be obeyed no matter which situation there is. And the inconsistency, I've actually written this down, was pretty ridiculous, because let me tell you guys some examples here. So exceeding track limits in qualifying was forbidden. You exceed track limits in qualifying, your time will be deleted and you will have to drive a new lap, or in the worst case scenario, you don't have any more time to do that and you will be dropped out from the qualifying session. You'll end up with a very bad starting position for the race. Now, exceeding track limits in qualifying forbidden, exceeding track limits in the race allowed, for whatever crazy reason, which nobody knows, which makes no sense whatsoever. And actually, even that's not true, because exceeding track limits in turn 4 in this race was allowed for most of the race, but during the race there was basically a memo telling the teams that you're not supposed to exceed track limits anymore. So even in the race, the rule for exceeding track limits in turn 4 was inconsistent. It changed during the race. So now basically what we have is exceeding track limits in qualifying was forbidden. In the race it was allowed sometimes, and exceeding track limits in the race when overtaking was forbidden. So as you see, guys, this is a problem, and for anybody who is asking me, well, what would I do differently? What is my cure to this? It's a very simple answer. In my opinion, in all of these 3 examples, whether it's qualifying, whether it's the race, or whether it's the race in a overtaking situation, exceeding track limits should be forbidden, and forbidden. There's a reason why they are called track limits. There's a reason why they are drawn onto the track. And if you exceed track limits, you are breaking the rules. So guys, if I was in the FIA, if I was one of the stewards sitting there instead of one of these silly Sallys, that's how I would solve this. And I hope really for the races to come, I hope that these guys, the stewards, get this solved as soon as possible and find some solution to that, because this kind of controversy could be prevented, and it's very unfortunate that it happens. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great week, and don't forget to leave your feedback in the comments section below or through social media, as well as subscribe to the channel if you're new to get notifications whenever a new video appears. Talk to you soon. Cheers, guys.